What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the phone again, and this time we return with September Mourning. Always great to be able to have you back on. Thanks for coming back on today.
Yeah, of course. Nice to be on.
Yeah, it's always great to speak with you. I'm currently calling you, you said, from a truck stop in Michigan.
Yeah, we're playing the Machine Shop tonight, so we are in Michigan today.
I've wanted to see that venue for so long, never got to, so this is probably the closest I will get to ever doing an interview at the Machine Shop, so this is an extraordinary honor. Thank you.
You just gotta take the trip out. You gotta get in the car and drive out. Although you're from New York, so we don't have cars in New York apparently. So.
Nope, I walk. Nope, I walk everywhere, and with the heat wave that we're having right now, I'm not going anywhere at the moment. So.
Yeah. Oh, how hot is it there? It's so hot here. Our Sprinter. We have a Sprinter bus. It overheated when we were driving the other night, and it was just the boost failed, and we were so concerned something was wrong with the engine, but it turned out that the coolant wasn't getting through because it was so hot that it was having to stock all the coolant in, and so we had to refill all the coolant because it was just using so much of it up.
That's insane.
It's hot everywhere, yeah. Global warming is a real thing, people.
Yeah. Well, some men just want to watch the whole world burn. I'm one of those men, and it really feels like it now. So.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But speaking of the whole world burning, Body Count, the latest single, is out now, and because you've had a very productive year. I remember when I first saw September Mourning, I think Volume 2 was the latest thing you were promoting on the OTEP tour back in 2016. So it's been a minute, but there's been a lot of progression from the Volume 3 EP to Volume 4 with the new single out. I mean, it's been very hectic. Because we all grow as artists, right? We all grow as human beings in our personal life, in and out of our art. So are you still going for the same vision and having the same sort of mentality of writing now as you did when I first started to get to know each other, or has maybe the direction of September Mourning kind of changed as we evolved as people?
I mean, it's definitely changed. Yeah, I don't think you can be an artist and not evolve. I think that's really against the grain to do that. But yeah, I mean, Body Count is definitely a lot heavier than anything we've ever written up into this. So we just wrote another heavy song, so that hasn't come out yet. But yeah, we're going down that heavy path a little bit now. It's just a product of how Rich is detuning his guitars a certain way, how I'm kind of approaching lyric writing and subject matter based around the next 3 books that are coming out through Image and Top Cow Comics. And that universe and how much heavier it's going to be. So, there's a lot more heavy in these books. There's a lot more weighted story. There's a lot more, friction between the life and the death occurrences. There's a lot more, heady material to think about when we're writing. So I think that kind of illustrates itself through our songwriting and through what's going on now.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I feel like when I first met you, it seemed like September Mourning had everything planned ahead, and it seemed like that there was a whole vision of where you would go from there. And I thought that's really cool, because I've always loved seeing how you express yourself both musically but also visually, and through all these different mediums, through visual art and literature and all that. And I was also wondering, with all these plans ahead, you never know where life is going to take you. Not to doubt any artist and their vision, but when an artist says oh, we already have plans for the next 7 albums or something like that, I'm do you really?
You're right.
So
no.
Because even though you are portraying a character or an entity in September Mourning, it's still coming from who you personally are. So I'd imagine that as you grow, the character that you portray is also growing with you, right?
Yeah, of course. And the next 3 books, I really went really full into the development of a different ecosystem and universe for these characters and set them up and really did deep dives into backstories and where their motivations lie, and different aspects of the storylines and things like that we could kind of tie together. We're introducing a new character into the series. It's going to be a whole different universe based on the characters from the first complete collection. So that makes it a little bit interesting, because with any good comic book series, I find, like Batman, for example, you have Batman and the Killing Joke is totally different than Batman and the Detective Comics. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're different universes. So, like, you can do, as long as you have a really strong character, you can put that character into many different places.
Yeah,
I'm
so glad you used that analogy. First off, I'd love to see a multiverse September Mourning, but like for instance, like Stan Lee wrote so many comics, but like Peter Parker was always Peter Parker in one way, but like there was many different ways of expressing him. And then Stan Lee, he lived a very long life. He experienced a lot. Like Peter Parker wasn't going to be the same just subconsciously. So I've always wondered how like bands that portrayed a character, like I saw a Family Guy scene that was really funny, and it was Angus Young from AC/DC, like in his schoolboy uniform doing that, and he goes, "I didn't know I would be doing this at 60," and there is something to wonder about that.
Yeah. I mean, September, the look is just kind of timeless. It's not schoolgirl. It's not, there's nothing like that about it. It's not a sexually driven character, right?
Yeah.
It's a very fantasy driven character, and with any good fantasy driven characters, like you look at all the characters in Lord of the Rings, right? Like the Hobbits, it could be 90 or they could be 12. You don't even know, right? It's like you don't know. There's no demographic in the character. It's just kind of there, and that's a fantasy genre sort of lineage thing. Like it doesn't, Gandalf has been around, but he could be 2 million years old or he could be 200 years old. You don't fucking know. It's a very, it's like, it's timeless is what I'm saying. So in that aspect, we circumvent the whole time sort of situation when it comes to other bands where, like a CBC with the schoolboy uniform when he's 60, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Her uniform, her character's uniform is very timeless. It's very, like, adaptable to different situations. So
I do want to ask, because I've always said that September Mourning is a very mysterious band. Like, I've always thought that character was very mysterious. And what's funny, it maintains that because I've seen September Mourning play a few times now. There were times where I was watching you from the very front of the stage, we were face to face, and then there was times where I was like watching you from the back. But either way, the mystique is still there. But there are a lot of people, your fans, who really wonder who you are. Sure, they may know your name, but like there is like they do wonder who you are, the person behind that character. Have you ever thought, like, this may sound lack of wording, if people want to get to know who you are, who you personally are, is September Mourning maybe a good way to personally get to know you? Or is this just a completely separate entity where you aren't really expressing any of your own personal experiences or your own personal life?
Well, it's like we were just discussing about Stan Lee, right? And Spider-Man and Peter Parker. There's a bunch of Stan Lee and Peter Parker, there was. Like, so, I think that when you're an artist, your art speaks volumes about who you are as a person. But that being said, knowing Emily, outside of the character September is definitely a totally different experience. I always think when I go on stage, it's like September's a microcosm of my personality that's magnified to the nth degree, and it's a piece of me, but it's not all of me. So when you meet me in person, I have a lot of different facets to my personality. There's a lot of different things going on there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that I'm like literally obsessed with do not find their way into, you know, my stage persona because they just don't exist there, you know? And then some things that I am do. So, you know, I think there's a little bit of that there. If they, you know, I have an Instagram, I have a Patreon, I'm on Twitter Spaces a lot. I'm, you know, I'm on like X or Twitter, or whatever you want to call it now, a lot, speaking my mind about the music industry and how I feel about certain things. So there's ways to kind of like delve into me as a person, who I am. It's not like, you know, I'm trying to be this mysterious person behind, you know, it's just, that doesn't exist very well anymore.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Well,
you know, even the guys in Ghosts, everybody knows who they are. Everybody knows who the guys in Sleep Token are, you know? Like, I mean, we all kind of know what's going on. But, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, you're going to tell me as soon as we're done with this interview who the folks in Sleep Token are, because I'm very curious. But like,
look it up online. It's all online.
But so one of my first impressions of you when I first interviewed you at the Smile Empty Soul show was that like I was very impressed with just how much of an intricate interviewee you are, how well you are at explaining yourself and explaining your art and your songwriting and all this, because I feel like that when people do portray a character, they sometimes get so lost to that character that they almost kind of don't exist in reality anymore, to the point where like communication between them and a journalist or them and a fan or whatever is almost just so lost in translation. I've always admired that in a way where like you really know how to just defy reality in your art, but also know how to be back in reality in real life as well. I've always just admired that. I feel like you enter both worlds flawlessly.
I appreciate that. I think that comes from just treating September Mourning as, you know, it's almost like I'm playing a movie role. Like if you see, you know, Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean, and then you watch Johnny Depp do an interview, you know, he's not going to act like Jack Sparrow in the interview, you know. He's going to see Johnny Depp talking about his character Jack Sparrow in the interview, even, you know, unless something's, you know, particular for that or something like that. Yeah. Same thing with like Iron Man, you know, or Thor, or any of these guys that portray movie characters, right? If you talk to the actor is going to, you know, tell you what's up from their point of view, their POV, instead of, you know, the POV of the character. And, you know, I can do it from the POV of the character. I can play that part and I can do that. But I think it's more interesting to know, you know, how I crafted it from behind the scenes than actually be in the mind of the character, because the mind of the character is written down in the books.
Well,
so you can go there for that, you know, or you can go to the stage show and watch that, you know, and you can experience that personality there.
Yeah. Well,
you know, why experience it in an interview? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a little weird.
Well, and circling back to what I talked about too, with like the personal aspects of your music, because I feel like the music is relatable to an extent. Like, for instance, I still think, and I cite this track all the time because it's gone down as one of my favorite songs, because at the time that it came out, it resonated with me on a personal level. But Skin and Bones with I've been beaten down, thrown around, you know, or my skin and bones, take it between two prisons, where do I call home? Like, that doesn't need, those are words that could be expressed from anybody that I feel like isn't portraying a character as well, because being like you know, questioning who you are both inside and taking you know, like the prison of, we're like in a prison within ourselves, and we're also within a prison within this world. I thought Skin and Bones was very, like, I don't think a character was needed, not to say that it was a hindrance, but like I don't even think that a character is needed to express a message like that, but it does fit with the character very well as well.
Right. Well, that's the line that I tried to walk within all the lyrics that we did for this, is I tried to walk that line where it's relatable, like to the person, to the listener, they can relate it to themselves. but it's also relatable to the character herself, you know? So being able to craft words and lyrics like that was a skill set that I tried to adapt and develop throughout this process.
Yeah.
And I think I did a pretty good job with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think, like, I wanted to talk a little bit about this. I've always been kind of like afraid to talk about it, only because sometimes it comes off as challenging in a way. But I really want to know this because you referenced Johnny Depp and you referenced like all these different movie characters. And, you know, when we see these characters, right, when we see these actors, like, you know, countless times I'm sure people have stopped Johnny Depp on the street and say, can we hear a Jack Sparrow impersonation? Or, you know, have stopped, you know, Tobey Maguire says, can we get a Peter Parker impersonation? But like, why do musicians tend to like, when I'm pretty sure that people have said it about Ghost, they said it about Slipknot, they said it about Marilyn Manson. I'm sure there have been haters that have even said it about you guys, where like, oh, it should be just about the music and not the look. Why are they doing this gimmick stuff? But so like, part of me, because I love what September Mourning, the world and the universe that you've created with September Mourning. But there are times where I see bands, they're like trying to be edgy and they're trying to be gimmicky in a way. And I do think it can be a hindrance sometimes. So how do you sort of walk that fine line between being, you know, having all these different elements, but also not losing the music and if that makes sense what I'm asking, you know? Yeah,
well, I mean, from the jump, this quote-unquote band wasn't a band. It was a transmedia project from the jump. Before I, you know, when I started thinking about the concept in 2019, I wasn't writing music. I was writing a story. The music didn't come till 2012, like, you know, 2013, 2014, when we really figured out the sound and stuff like that. We might have been piddling around with demos and shit, but like, we weren't really focused on that. I was focused on who is this character? What is their motivation? What are they here to do? Right? Like that's what I was focused on. And that's quite different than some band wearing some makeup, doing, you know what I'm saying? Doing like a, you know, sort of like we're going to be golfy, or, you know, we're going to go to the Halloween store and get a bunch of skeletons and put them on our stage. Or, you know, like, I think it comes down to purpose.
Yeah.
So what's the purpose? You know, so September Mourning always had a purpose of why we look the way we look, why I act the way I act, why I perform the way I perform. I knew going into this, you know, and when we started touring in 2014, like really heavy, like my purpose was solidified. You know, a lot of those bands try to reverse engineer shit, which is what gets them in trouble. Because when you reverse engineer shit, your purpose, you're trying to make up a purpose for what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? Instead of having a purpose for what you do. And that right there is the answer to your question. We've always had a purpose.
That is the best answer I've ever gotten too. Because, like, look, there are bands that I've seen now, because especially now with the whole new metal nostalgia thing, which is cool, I'm seeing a lot of new bands who have been inspired. I'm not going to mention names, but you and I could get some ideas of what names they are. They're like literally going up there looking like Mudvayne clones, or you know, trying to like be like, you know, the new Mushroom Head or something like that. And it's like what made me gravitate towards the Marilyn Mansons and the Mudvaynes and the Slipknots back in the day. Now when I see new bands do it, I find it just very cringy, if that makes sense.
Oh, it's super cringe. But see, here's the thing. You have to understand the culture we're living in right now, right? We're living in a culture that adheres and admires replication, okay? We're living in a TikTok, take a sample of a song and do a dance to it and get famous culture. We're living in a culture that you can do cover songs and get your band bigger than doing originals. we're living in a culture that adheres and admires replication and basically taking from what's already popular and and blatantly doing it so. Like, not like before. It's like, I mean, I think that it was either I think it's Warhol or maybe it was Picasso. I don't know. One of the artists.
Warhol.
Yeah, stealing, like, you know, to be a good artist, you know, you take something. To be a great artist, you steal. You know, like, that's what he said, right? So we're like living in the ridiculous right-wing version of that right now. Well, and it's not good.
Well, so here's the thing. I've never had a problem with like a repetition. Like, for instance, the metalcore movement, right? I'm a huge metalcore fan. I love Killswitch, As They Lay Dying, All That Remains, Shadows Fall, all those bands, right? But look on how different they've all become. Sure, when you listen to the first albums, listen to the first album from Killswitch Engage, Shadows Fall, and All That Remains. They sound very similar. They almost sound like the same band. Then look at how they evolved and how they, you know, All That Remains started doing like more hard rock in a way. Killswitch Engage really perfected a sort of formula that worked for them. Shadows Fall kind of experimented a little bit within their own realms, kind of going death metal at times and kind of just going mainstream hardcore at the time. I think it's how we evolve that makes us all different. I don't mind when a band, like, for instance, take Bad Omens, for example, right? They started off, I remember seeing them playing with like Chelsea Grin and, you know, Era and all these bands. Like, they were a run-of-the-mill metalcore band, and now look at the behemoth that they've become because of how differently they evolved. I think it's how you evolve that makes all these bands ultimately different.
Right. But the point I'm trying to make is that, I mean, I get evolution. You have to start from somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think what made all those bands that you named from the beginning, like Tool and all these other bands, like from back in the day, what made them so exceptional was they were really coming from a place of originality. They weren't really coming from a place of mimicking and grifting, you know? And I find a lot of new bands are just trying to mimic and grift off of something blatantly that's been done before.
Well, I think Tool,
is, you know,
Tool, I think, is a weird example. Like, for instance, Tool, I don't think was too original. I think that they were a very grungy Pink Floyd at the time. I think a lot of like these new metal bands, like when new metal became, everybody was ripping off Korn. Everybody was ripping off Korn. You look at Deftones, you look at System,
right.
But look how now you won't.
But they added. But okay, so if you look at Deftones versus Korn, yeah, I get what you're saying, like the down tuning and stuff like that. But Deftones, Chino had a totally unique way of crafting lyric, melody, and rhythm. It was so different. You know what I'm saying? It was like, what? You know?
But
like, it just, you know, the basis might have been very similar, but the top line, holy fuck.
But Adrenaline, that first album was a blatant, and I'm saying that it's a bad thing. I love that album, but like I still think that is, it's a quote-unquote Korn, and then they put out Around the Fur and White Pony and so on, and then they developed and became their own thing beyond that. I don't mind bands, I don't mind it. See, I've always said September Mourning was just original from the get-go, because I think you have a very signature voice. I can listen to your voice and know that that's you. And I think that the way that you make your songs and the visuals around it, it's such an experience. Like, I really feel like September Mourning, I like 20, 30 years from now, we have a Disneyland like dedicated to September Mourning in a way. And but like
that would be amazing.
But like I never looked at September Mourning as like a clone of anything else, but a lot of other bands have been clones in a way, and then they evolved, and then that's how they eventually became different. I don't think anybody starts off different, if that makes sense, or very rarely do they start off different.
I think the reason why is because it's very hard to get traction when you're different. It's easier to clone something and ride the coattails of that thing that's already made the path.
Yeah.
And then develop into your own thing with already the fan base that you've developed from those people. You know what I'm saying? I get why people do it. I understand why people do it.
Yeah, but then people try to be. I think when people try to be original, that's where it goes back to the cringy aspect of that you and I began this part talking about. When people try so hard to be original, you're not. You know what I mean? It's like when people try so hard to be edgy, when really they're just kind of being annoying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that all comes down to the purpose, right? So if you started as something that was kind of like a mimic of something else, and then you're developing off of that, and you're reaching for something that's very out of your wheelhouse, you know, then it becomes super cringy because the purpose wasn't there from the jump. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to do something that's a little bit off-center, the purpose has to be there from the jump, which means that cloning something is going to be harder to do unless you're cloning something that's very off-center, and then it just becomes like, you know, people are like, oh, well, that's like so like this, you know. Then you get that cringe effect. Yeah. So it's a little bit of both. Yeah. It's hard, you know. It's really hard. And then
there's just a matter of good songs too. Like I think good songs just trump everything else. Like for instance, one of my favorite new bands is On to Others right now. I don't know if you heard of them. They are gothic rock, you know, just like The Cure, just like Him, just like any of those bands. But the songs are good. The songs are fun to listen to and amazing. I think if you make good songs, it doesn't matter how you look or it doesn't matter what you do. I think the good music should always be the priority, which is what I think is so ironic about September Mourning, because your songs are incredible. They are atmospheric. They take me into another realm. Like I can listen to your music when I'm like sitting alone and smoking a little weed and get lost in the track a little bit. And then I could listen to your music on the go, on the subway ride or anywhere. You know what I mean? That's something unique. But being that it was never intended to be a band at first, I think that's pretty astonishing too.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't intended to be just a band, let's say that. It was always intended to have a musical component, because it was transmedia, but it wasn't just a band. It had a purpose behind it that was beyond that, you know, to establish a storyline and a character through different media outlets, music being one of them, one of the branches of them. Does
your creative energy change depending on the medium? Does it, or being that it's still September Mourning, it still feels very much the same if you're writing lyrics versus writing, you know, stories?
Oh, no, it's a totally different animal. Like when I'm writing the books versus writing, you know, lyrics to a song. I think there's like a visceral component of songwriting that is just beyond, you know, just any literature writing, and it just comes from the music and what that does to you on an emotional scale. I mean, words can definitely do that. Like I've read literature that, you know, has made me cry when I'm reading it. So I'm not saying that it can't. I'm just saying that there is a almost, visceral effect from musical notes that adds another layer to the emotional response from just the words. So because of that, it's a different animal. And you're writing that.
And one of my favorite quotes is, even if you're writing fiction, it still has to make sense. So how much harder is it? Because with writing a story, there's a linearity behind it where you just grow and grow and grow. But with writing lyrics, you have to circle back with a chorus and you have to have a hook and all this. So how do you think that the narrative also changes in a way? Do you think September Mourning expresses a different expresses a different message with a different medium?
Well, I think that the for me anyway, how I write for her, or you know, for me, for her, in the songwriting process, to me it feels like I'm writing a story based around an emotional pulse as lyrics. And in the comic books and stuff like that, it's an emotional pulse coming from a story. It's almost like, you know, it's opposite, but it's the same thing, but it's the POV is on a different place, on a different plane. Because you can people look at the way I see the world is totally different than the way you see the world, right?
Yeah.
So you know, it's just two different ways of looking at the same thing from two different angles, but it is the same thing. You know, it's all story. The good songs tell a story, whether it's an emotional story, whether it's a, you know, like a linear sort of like I walked into, you know, McDonald's and I got a drink and, you know, whatever. Like I'm sitting behind a McDonald's, that's why I said McDonald's. But you know, like whether it's that or it's an emotional thing where it's basically describing the story of why the, you know, narrator finds themselves trapped between these two places and is always questioning like where their home base is, you know, like what is the real home, like who is the real me, right? And why do I get pushed back from the outer world to like to define me, basically. So that's a whole story in 3 minutes and 20 seconds or how long that song is, you know, but it's still a story, right? It's still a story. I'm still telling you a story. And then you have the book where she's fighting fate and like, and it's reapers and this and that, the other thing. And there's all this intricate, like things that are happening. So that's a story as well. You see, they're stories, but they're looked at from two different POVs. Do
you feel like because you mentioned that pulse and that emotional pulse when you're working on something, because the technical proficiency of your music is very impressive, that clearly has to take a lot of time, and then also, you know, writing a book takes an eternity sometimes. Do you find it like the longer you work on something, the harder it is to maintain that emotional pulse?
No, I find that the more I work on something, the deeper I go. Like, because it's like an onion. You just peel back a layer and there's another layer, and then you peel that back and there's another layer, and then you're like, oh shit, there's another layer. It's very much that. I think that when I started this, you know, I started this band after one of my best friends died from an overdose, and I didn't know how to cope with the fact that they were gone and I wanted them back. And so I wrote a character that could bring somebody back from the dead. You know, it was a layer. It was a very topical layer of emotion response to this tragedy that kind of curtailed my life. And after that layer, I went deeper into the character, and I found another layer, and then another layer, and then I just keep on peeling back these layers, you know, the more that we do it.
That's very admirable. And I mean, I give you credit, because to lose somebody and create such a magical experience that resonates with a lot of people, I mean, that's hard. I mean, you used pain as your armor rather than your anchor, as I've sometimes say, and that's very admirable. Do you find it, though, like, is there, because I've always said that we as artists, sometimes we can become victimized by our own product in a way, if that makes sense. We get so lost into it that we drive ourselves into madness, and the result ends up being despair more than relief. So is there a balance between, you know, trying not to lose yourself in your work as well?
I think because I've so much divided myself from the character that, you know, doing these interviews like we're doing it right now, like you said before, keeping myself in a separate lane keeps that from happening, right? Because you always have that tether to reality that you don't break, you know?
Yeah, and so
it's like in Inception when they have the little tether, the twirling top. And he's like, if this falls over, I'm in reality. If it stays straight, then and it keeps going and going and going, I'm in the dream. So I have my little tether that I keep, you know. So I always know it's going to fall over, and I'm here. So
that's amazing, and I think that's a lot of artists can be very much inspired by the words you have to say. Before we go, I want to thank you as usual for your time, for your time. For most of all, thank you just for your music and always for just a great conversation. Every time I have the opportunity to interview you, I always know it's going to be a great interview because you have such an intricate way of describing your work and just art in general. Is there just anything else with September Mourning that we could be expecting with the release? You said we're going to get some more heavy stuff very soon. What else could we be expecting from September Mourning in the near future, if you're allowed to say at this very moment, of course?
Well, we have the 3 new books that are coming out. I just turned them in, so we're waiting on scheduling all that. But I'm hoping to get the first one out before the end of the year. Oh, wow. And that whole new universe. We have a new song that's probably going to go out in the next month or so. That's really, really heavy. It's going to be featured on Gala Music, which is a Web3 platform. During COVID, I got really heavy into Web3, NFTs, cryptocurrency. And I basically funded the band using, Web3 technology.
Oh, wow.
To garner a big fan base over there that was like ridiculously supportive of what we wanted to do. And so I continue to ride that wave. They just, Gala Music just wrapped our tour bus in September Mourning art and Gala Music QR codes, so that we're traveling billboard of art and music right now, which is very, very cool, and helped fund a little bit of this tour. They've been, endlessly supportive of my endeavors, and, we've been a big success on their platform. And I advise them a bit about Web3 since I was the first female hard rock musician to mint and sell an NFT on chain. And I'm on 9 platforms, and I have over 2,000 collectors. So I've been really deep into this whole culture for a while now, trying to figure out the attendance back to musician in the varying degrees of the devaluation of the music industry, or music in general, not the industry, but music in general right now. So that's been a big, thing for me. So we're going to be putting out, we usually put most of our music out through Gala first. So if you want to go and stream it there, you can go to music.gala.com and just sign in with your, Gmail account or, your Meta account. It's free to sign in, and you can stream whatever on the platform. You can find September Mourning on there, stream all of our new stuff. Some of it is not available on any streaming service except for Gala. And if you really love the track, you can pick one up as a collectible. And our collectibles over there, if you have them, you can bring one to a show, and you get into our VIP meet and greets for free. So they're a dual purpose sort of ticket situation. Anywhere in the country, they work with us. Oh, wow. So, it's pretty cool. But we're going to be doing a lot more with them, and in the future, and developing a lot more of the technology over there. So very excited about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much as usual, and I can't wait to see you all bring these new songs live. Really appreciate it. Everybody, we are here with September Mourning. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.